You are listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Protea Machining. And this week, I am very happy to welcome back Brian Kippen of KAD Models. Brian, we were just talking. It has been far too long since you were last on. Episode 135 was your first episode where we kind of dove into your backstory. But I mean, I've had guests like with about a 2 year span before, and like there's been a lot, but like I feel like the last 2 years you've had a lot. So let's dive into it, man. What's been going on since March of 2022?
I guess that's a really good question. I listened to the episode because it's been so long and I didn't know how much I discussed about history and things like that. And I thought it was funny that I was like, oh, I've been researching car seats. And, that's something that's quite funny because I did research car seats. We had a car seat, and then bonus feature of once you get a car seat, you typically need a larger car seat. I think kids have to be in car seats till they have a driver's license now.
It shocked me when I started going down that rabbit hole of like, wait, how long do I have to have this terrible thing in my car for? Like, this is insane.
God forbid you want two of the same safe thing. We ended up, just to clear that one up, Dylan, you and I have talked a little bit off of this from like, there are plenty of Insta machinists that are expecting dads and moms and things like that. And we ended up with a Nuna car seat, which is dynamite. It's safe because it weighs 400 pounds. It's like you put it in a Honda Fit and it's going to survive, but the car won't. We travel a lot, and we bought an 8-pound car seat for traveling. The problem with it is it's too wide to get down the airplane aisle. So we end up with the 35-pound Nuna. We found a little dolly that helps us carry it because, just one child with a car seat is, we've never let Carter walk down the aisle of the airplane unless he's getting on the plane. So he doesn't know that during the flight, he can actually walk around. He's going to listen to this in 5 years and question his love for his parents, but that's fine. But yeah, it was fun listening to that episode, and I can't stand listening to my voice. I'm amazed how many episodes you've done. You probably listened to them all. But actually, given the fact that it's been 3 years, I was able to listen to it. I guess it'll be 4 years in March since I was last on. So a lot's changed. If those people want to listen to the origin story, they can listen to 135. But at this point, we've gone through a lot of changes. Much of what I was discussing in the previous episode was the trials and tribulations of stepping from Haas to Matsura. I couldn't figure out how to use the data server at that point because the machine was relatively new to us. That's all been fixed. We now have a second Matsura. We have a MAM. We've got a third facility essentially that we're running out of. I spent some time teaching high school manufacturing. I spent 2 years doing that on top of running a company on two coasts, having a newborn, got married, bought a house in Vermont. It's been pretty stable, low stress.
Yeah, you definitely don't have too much to do or even enough to do. It sounds like you got ample time on your hands.
Yeah. So, I think, and I just started restoring another car.
I love it.
But yeah, things have been going really well. There's the thing about business which is really difficult. And I speak to a good friend of mine who was on Within Tolerance a while ago, Eric Larson. We talk back and forth quite often. And one of the things that's really difficult about being a business owner is like when somebody asks you how a business is, it's great, it's wonderful, things are awesome. And meanwhile, you're going back home and you're like, geez, why do I say that every single time? 15 going on 15 years in business, there are days where it still is, the same excitement as day one. And then there are also days where you find yourself, wondering who's in charge. And then there's days where you wonder who you can complain to. And you would think that after years, it would just be smooth sailing. But I think, it's when you're in growth, you're growing. And there's also times where in, running a company, you have to decide what direction you're going. And this year was a pretty difficult year for us, mainly because of the directions that I was hoping we were going, and then a realization that, a fast-paced prototype shop does not necessarily equate to a fast-paced, high precision shop unless you start changing either pricing or lead times or things like that. So, there's plenty of changes that we ended up having to make, and decisions that I had to make as a business owner that were, maybe I don't know how many people sit down and write a business plan. I think business plans are like running through a field of rakes. You end up stepping on them, and every single turn you take, it's, oh, that was part of the plan. And then you have a migraine. So, all these things that you come up, um, in order to grow a business and try to become profitable or whatever your goal is, kind of turn into issues where you have to make decisions, and those decisions, as you grow and get bigger, become more expensive. We decided that last year I started going after a bit more precision work. And the previous episode I talked about, one of the beautiful things is fast pace. You rarely have to show your work. You just have to send good parts. What changes when you have to show your work or you have to do inspection and create a first article inspection is the amount of time. And for those of us who are prototype shops, I think your readership, viewership, listenership understands that it takes a bit of crazy to want to be a fast-paced prototype shop and maintain prototype quantities. We still do that. We've added some production, but we're talking hundreds of units and not thousands. And so most of our customers are still looking for quick turn. And when those customers decide, oh, we want quick turn plus, we want first article inspection, full inspection sheets, we've probably had half a dozen quality rejects in 15 years. But once you start checking your work, what you have to understand is you start losing things that you're not used to. So you've got a programmer who's programming parts, typically setting up, and we have automation run parts. If it's a one-off part, automation never takes over, unless you have your beginning automation, which is your tooling work holding that shenanigans. But
Right.
As soon as you ask somebody to do quality, that person comes offline from programming, comes offline from setting up, and then they're checking a part. So you really look at it as you're losing 33 or 66% of productivity when you pull a programmer. And I don't know how good you would have to be able to schedule 20-minute cycle time, 20 minutes of inspection time, and 2 hours of programming time to get it dialed for like a quick turn part. So this year we went through that. We saw our numbers go down. Morale also went down because imagine knowing what numbers you have to hit and then finding out that you're not hitting them, but you're working your butt off, and you've got a team of 10 people doing that, and then ask them a question and they say, well, this is the problem. We're like, I can't program because I have to inspect this part. And I know the part's good because we do in-process probing and all this other stuff. And, the idea that a CMM is not creating chips, it's creating beeps, is cool. I mean, it really is. But at the same time, you still have to program it. There still is time there, and, you don't get that time on the machine. So that's one of those things. So that was a big learning curve this year. We made hires.
CMM wise,
We didn't go. We ended up. I decided that we should maintain when we do need that. We use outside service, and right now we use the Rent-A-Shop Power Inspector through Fusion. We're using the Fusion Inspect and getting the data from there. It creates a really good sheet. There is the argument that you're using a spindle to create an inspection sheet. Many people don't trust the machine that made the part to inspect the part. I would argue that the software is so much easier to learn because you're already using it. The hardware, so provided that you've inspected or you've checked that it works. And we're just not going to be taking the work that's going to demand that we do that until we build to the point where we can actually have a quality team. And the problem with that is also going to be you're still going to decrease lead time or increase lead time, decrease productivity.
100%.
And it's a tough place to be, but when you look at numbers don't lie, and you're making these decisions to make sure that you have a good work environment. And programmers don't really like CMM type work. They like their builders.
Right.
So we're going to maintain what we do best and build parts. It comes at a kind of like a significant cost to what, as a pride thing, what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So long as we're keeping our core customers happy and, utilizing that and explaining this is why it is. I did recently have a conversation with a client that asked the question about a CMM, and they didn't believe we could maintain the qualities they needed. I asked them what it is that they needed, and they needed a CMM or a first article inspection report. So we can provide that. It's going to cost time, which they're fine with. But without a CMM, they didn't believe that we could provide the quality they needed. They have an in-house CMM inspection department. Every single part that they have comes through and gets inspected. And so I said, so if I ship you a part and I inspected it and you find that it deviates in some way, shape, or form, you're going to reject it. I said, yes. I said, so if I send you a part that I did not inspect with the CMM and you inspect it and it deviates and you reject it, it's a reject. And I said, yes. I said, so at the end of the day, what you're looking for is an argument, and you're going to win the argument because you're going to reject it. I said, I can do that without a CMM. We can have an argument. It'll cost me less money and it'll cost less time for either one of us.
Right.
And they laughed and said, I guess that will work. But I think that, developing those relationships with customers, to be able to have that conversation is paramount, but also you do have to question why a customer is doing 100% inspection on parts that they're bringing in and requesting that you do the same thing. And if they're going to reject it, it's unless you have the same operator on both sides. I've seen CMMs, two different operators spit out two different numbers. It's really difficult. Quality is quality. If it's a bad part, it doesn't matter how you inspected it. If you passed it, it's still junk if the customer can't use it. So,
right.
We don't want to double down or triple the efforts that we're making in order to make a customer happy. We want to make sure that everybody's spending the least amount of time to get a quality part. Otherwise, everybody's costs go up, and this has been the year of wanting for costs to go down. Our tariffs. Well, I guess this year just started, so we don't know what it's going to do. But last year, definitely that. This year, what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can become a nation that triples its costs and survives.
Right. So are you seeing this kind of work at both facilities? Because from what I remember of your last episode, you didn't really share customers or work between the facilities unless you absolutely had to.
Correct. And at this time, there is some work that goes from 1 to quantity 15 that we will share West Coast, East Coast. But for the most part, it's the East Coast clients that are asking for more of the quality standard, but also the fast turn. And I think that's what's really difficult is like our core, I started reading business books 14 years into running the business because that's what smart people do. And there's a few things that I read and it's like, oh, you kind of have to figure out where you are. Are you convenient? Are you high quality? Are you this? And I think the analogy was having to do with restaurants or something along those lines. And, I take pride in the fast turn. And I think that's a that's really what we're trying to do, is help bring things to market. And we kind of started spooling up a production facility, which it has the time. It's an ISO facility, and it has the time because it has to be baked in. You can't even ramp up, production on most items and have you add ISO to it, and there's 4 days
Right.
at a minimum.
Talking about like knowing what you are, if you haven't done it, and I'll advise listeners to do it too. It feels a little silly when you do it, but if you go to branding.cards and get the brand deck, it's like 1 million cards with adjectives that describe your business. And you go through and you find, I can't remember how it works, but I think you find like the 10, or you divide the deck basically into like, these are the things we are and these are the things we're not. Yeah. And it really gives you, for us, like, it was very interesting to see like, oh, okay, like these are the words that we want associated with us, and like we need to do everything possible to make sure that that's what we present.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important thing that somebody should have told me 14 years ago. What do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, you asked my son that question, and he wants to drive a monster truck. He wants to have a cyber truck. He wants to be a farmer. He wants an airplane, and he thinks he can go from California to Vermont on a boat. So he and I share a lot of the same thoughts of how to run a business, what you want to be when you grow up.
Oh, man. Awesome.
But I think that it is really important, because there are certain things that you want to be, but when you look at the whole, what you want to be, what you can be, they sometimes don't. It'd be next to impossible to be a fast-paced Inconel, or choose your exotic prototype manufacturer, unless you have stock of everything, and then you've got a cash flow problem.
Right. Yeah.
And it's such a tough thing, because like as you grow, there's no, one of the things that I do like about our community of people is that you get to listen to others who have been further ahead. But it is really difficult, because there's still that pride in workmanship and things like that, where, and pride in entrepreneurship, where you're supposed to say things are dynamite. And it's kind of like, what was the machinist therapy hotline could have had more therapy. I think I miss those guys, and I think they did some interpersonal therapy sessions. But I think that what's really difficult is having these conversations, and like, it's okay not to be okay,
right?
But you also want to make sure that you're not saying that to sharks. And I think that's a really difficult thing, is when you look at the industry as a whole, like, there really are a lot of sharks in our minds, but there are not so many sharks in reality. I think even the movie Jaws would say that. But one thing that we need, like, we do need to be able to use resources and those around us to say, like, hey, these are things that happen. I think you had said this once, but I had talked to John Saunders before, and some business owners went through business school, and they do understand the fundamentals of where you're going to get. Many of the machinists that I know, it's kind of, maybe they were machining for a while, and maybe they decided it was neat to build things, and then it wasn't neat to be an employee, and they would have all this free time if they owned their machines. How's that going for you?
Right. Yeah,
exactly. It's like, add automation, it's gonna give me more free time. It's like, oh, but you got to fill the automation. And then things continue to go, and you just keep building the company. And what's cool is, like, you talk to people who have done things through kind of a business sense, and they tell you some of the gotchas. And we're 15, going to be 15 years old in October, and the world has changed a lot in how you can start a machine shop. I mean, I've seen some people start machine shops, and I've had conversations from Instagram, and you look at those individuals and you're like, holy cow, they went from 0 to 100 in an absolute hurry. what is their monthly payment? And I think what's difficult is like we have everyone kind of has this idea of wanting to show and be better than maybe they can be or are and things like that. But I think it's also good to be able to have a conversation with another machine shop owner and say, hey, these are what the things that I'm thinking about. Like for us, turning was one of those things where I bought a turning center in 2021 and just a simple ST20Y with just, a tailstock. And about a month ago, we did a job, and I was like, "Holy cow! That job just paid for that machine." Because
Awesome.
I mean, there are times when it's we've been running the machine's like 5 years old now, and I bought it because we didn't have a turning center, and there's times where you need one or you want one. Maybe you never need a machine. You need a job. You don't need a machine. But I think that one of the things was like every single job we did on that machine that is like, oh, we need a new insert tool. We need this. We need that. It's like you build a part and you kind of break even or you make a little bit of money. And it was just the first time we'd ever done a job where it's like we made parts. We didn't buy more tooling than we made parts. So 4 years in, that was at a luckily that was a $60,000 machine, but at the same time it was one of those things where you know, I had for 10 years used somebody who had a CNC lathe and they were awesome at it. And it's really difficult when you think that two axis can't be that hard. Um, but everything sticks out of of a rigid, and you can't add support around it. It's not
Right.
like, you can't picture frame around part.
Yeah.
I love picture framing because it's all supported. But I think that that's one of those things that I'm kind of looking forward to in the next phase of business is being able to be a resource in that, but also understand that there is a community out here that has the ability to talk you off a ledge, or talk you onto a ledge, or
Maybe a little bit of both. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we've got some people that you talk to and you're like, if I ever do that, I want somebody to like hit me. And then there's times where it's like, oh, I got the answer to that.
Mhm.
I could help.
Yeah.
Um, but I
No,
think it's
a
it's
great
also the
community
pride.
to be a part
Yeah.
of. But like, I think you're right. Like, there is a little bit of a toxic positivity. I think
Yeah.
maybe Instagram, it not as much as like LinkedIn and all of that stuff, where you're just like, you just get so sick of it. You're like, all right, you can acknowledge that like some days just suck as a business. Like it's okay. Like
Yeah.
some days I just don't want to be here. I'm pissed that I even started this. I'm like, I could just go be a bartender and have zero stress. And I mean, yeah, like it's crazy. Before we go too far down this rabbit hole though, you've had some big changes. We got to go over them first. So you were teaching high school.
Yeah. So
What
let's
happened
let's
next?
just go like step by step.
Yeah.
August of 2022, my son was born. No issues with the birth and any of that. My wife is a midwife. Um, so midwives have midwife friends, and so I think we had four midwives attending. And my wife, being the badass that she is, caught Carter herself. So it's like we
Oh my
were over
God.
prepared. So the excess capacity, um, which was great. It was one of those experiences where you have to go through having a child to understand what it's like to have a child. And at this point, 3 years in, or I guess 3.5 years in, pretty soon, I wouldn't trade it for the world. But I mean, if you were to break down every day, I bet there'd be a lot of days I'd trade. So he was born beginning of August, about the 22nd ish of August. Our local technical high school um, called on me and said, "Hey, we don't have a manufacturing instructor. We're going to lose the program if we don't get one." And I think it's lack of sleep. And I said, "Oh, well, why don't I just stop by?" So I had just dropped my car off and I was riding my bicycle back to the shop, and so I stopped by the school, and they walked me through the manufacturing. Is called industrial design and fabrication at that point, and they had two Bridgeports that they bought in 2019, brand new Bridgeports. I didn't know they still made them, but they do. That had Accurate DROs, and then one Sharp manual lathe that had an Accurate DRO that was not set up properly. The two axes were were not, somehow they had assigned them, and then there was the issue that they didn't fully calculate how many revolutions of the cross feed actually equated to a thousandth. So the thing was completely off. So that's, oh, and we had a Boss laser. Then somebody had taken apart a Star fab table, like a lit plasma table.
Okay.
Mind you, the plasma table had no ventilation. So it was in a classroom setting with no ventilation. So that was really good. So I took the position because, why not?
Insane.
Insane person. So first day of school for an educator is usually a few days before the students come in. And I literally started the second day of what they call like the beginning of the school year. So I missed the first day for the teachers. And it was one of those things where I remember being a high school student, but I don't remember being a high school student. I mean, I don't remember the teacher side of the high school student. So kids come in and they were expecting the teacher that they had essentially interviewed with the previous year. So all of a sudden, that teacher's gone. Some of these students had a relationship because the school was a full-time school. So students, you start in September and you end in June, and those students are with you 5 days a week the entire year, and from 9 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. So it's not an elective program. So there's a lot of teacher, the relationship building really happens there. Many of these students, tech ed, in my opinion, is really, really difficult because it's not seen as a privilege. It's seen as, before you drop out, please try this. Mm-hmm. And not every tech school is this way, but a lot of them are. So you find that you're getting students who are kind of really, really close to dropping out, and it's just they haven't found the place to learn. And what was unfortunate is, like, you would get students who are really interested in the welding side of things. We had welders. The previous educator had bought 3 new welders, but we had 2 outlets for the welders. So we had, when I took over, we had 5 welders, but only 2 outlets. So, that's not really useful. And
you wouldn't buy 3 if you only had 2 outlets that you knew you only had 2. What?
Yes, I know. So it's like maybe the infrastructure. So one of the things is, like city government budgets, use it or lose it. Mm-hmm. So I think the program had like a $12,000 budget. These welders, they're nice Miller welders. They're probably $3,800 educational discount welders. So buy 3 new welders. Use the money.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it just was like, great. So I didn't do a infrastructure assessment when I started the job. I only did it when the students were like, we got these welders, can we use them? And I was like, sure, let's learn about how to unpack and properly set up a welder. It's like, cool. Sorry guys, the auto program needs a welder. So anyway, there was that element of it, but the students didn't understand machining. I find that most people, unless they had somebody in manufacturing in their household, don't understand it. But they did know what a welder was.
Mhm.
I like to introduce the welder as an appliance and a fabricator as the human. Um, so when a student said, "I want to be a welder," and I would bring them to say, "Meet Mr. Lincoln and Mr. Miller. These are welders." You want to be a fabricator. So we had to go through. I mean, the beginning of the school year was all about safety, and that drags on. So I tried to get through it in about two weeks. We would intersperse other things in there, so it wasn't these students weren't walking out. But it's really difficult when you and I, who have been in manufacturing for quite a while, you understand basic things, basic safety, what forward, backwards, tape measure, distance, and many of these kids didn't even understand how to read a tape measure. So micrometer was out. So starting with fabrication is pretty easy as far as sticking two pieces of material together.
Mhm.
The difference between a fabricator and a welder is you have to get accuracy. Somebody's not going to start a new at a school fabricator as not somebody's not going to prep the material and cut it for them and bevel and all this other stuff. So it was started many students in that. My first year, I had started with 10 students, lost 2 students because I was not the teacher that was going to let students just sit there. And also I had a cell phone rule. So cell phones went away. They went in a drawer when you walked in the room. Um, and students, they got them back before the end of the day and also before lunch. But it was very different than what they were used to. And, so it took a couple weeks to build relationships so the kids didn't think that you were just an a-hole.
Mhm.
Most of them probably didn't think that by the end of the year. Probably some of them did. But it was this eye-opening experience. It was first day I went home and I told my wife, any teacher you've ever had or know about, blanket apology and blanket thank you. You just and then you could just like mic drop after doing that. Thank you and I'm sorry. And it was, so the first day was what am I doing? And then the second day was I need to do something. So I had to create a project that was simple to intermingle with the safety stuff because safety videos are really dull. Some of them do have blood, but other than that, that's the only thing that kids talk about.
Right.
And so I ended up creating a project for them. It was a prototype project, and I started getting them to build things.
What
And
was it? What was the project?
I made an air cannon,
Oh, cool.
but we used 35-gallon trash bins. So I went and I just bought a whole bunch of stuff at the hardware store because I was like, this will take a day to figure out. And it took more than a day because when you write down on a board for 16, 17, and 18-year-olds that the project is to move a can off a table from 15 feet away without touching it. And here is all the stuff you can use. And I'm going to break you into 3 groups. And that just turned into a what?
Right.
So then you had to, show what these things are, what does a bungee cord do? It's got elasticity. Like, how are we going to do this? And without experience, which is what manufacturing is, you have no ability. And I think that that's one of the things that I constantly see in manufacturing is like the more experience you have in life, the better you are in figuring out problems. And so just giving somebody a problem, it was very, very hard for these students to understand. So I started having to break it, spent the first 3 hours being like, okay, here's the idea of what we're going to do. And then it's like, oh, I'm going to show you a video that's similar. And then they started to get on, and it took 2 days to build air cannons that would move these things off the table. And one student, after the first 2 hours, just walked up to the cannon, hit it, and walked out, and he didn't Like I had to go to the office to figure out where he had gone. He decided to leave for the day.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's various things that I learned about being a teacher. Overall, the experience was really good that first year.
You said you
I
started with 10 and ended with 8 that year?
No, I ended up ending with 10. I just had two students transfer out. I had one student transfer out. He went to a construction trades program. About 3 weeks later, he came to me and apologized, and said that he wanted to be back in my program. And I think it's basically because day one, I walk into the classroom, students come in and they kind of went off into the areas that they had left the previous year.
Mm-hmm.
Like the welding kids went to weld, and I was like, no, you can't just do that. You don't own this place. Like, I don't know that you know this. So it was like Mr. Rules. That's who I was.
I gotcha.
Yeah. So it just turned into one of those situations. I mean, one of the things is students, and I don't know if this is just each school has its own thing, but students don't necessarily have the same ability. You can't really fire a kid. I think you should be able to fire somebody in a tech program.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's not cool for some sort of public education. That I never got that far in the book. But I mean, I understand it, but I really do think that being able to understand that safety, like if you are not safe in the workplace, you're fired.
Mm-hmm.
And in education, that's one of the things that really is paramount is that. But I think that there are certain things with it that is really difficult to have. Safety is really important, but also having students that are engaged. That was a very difficult thing, is getting engagement. And so what it ended up being is technically had one program that I was teaching, but essentially 10 different classes, because each student had a different thing that they were going after. Luckily, I only had 10 students because it was really difficult. I would say that the first year was probably the most stressful job I've ever had. And I'll say it's teaching. You get really good benefits. The pay, I was paid equivalent to been taught for 15 years, because they take your skill, your education, and then they take your skill and they divide that by 2 and give you that as your tenure. So if you have 20 years of experience in a field, they give you 10 years of tenure in education. So the pay was, this is Vermont, mind you, I think it was $54,000 a year. The idea that you get a summer off is BS, because you couldn't afford to live on $54,000 a year, even in rural Vermont, unless you had roommates, and it's rural, so probably won't.
Right.
The health benefits are really good, but I think you have an issue with the fact that I couldn't afford to do it without having the business. So I worked in the mornings before school, and then I worked in the afternoons after school, and then I was new full-time dad. My wife is, I don't know why she puts up with me.
How did you do that?
Which part?
Yes, exactly. Like, that's like having a business and teaching alone would, I think, stretch many people. And to be a new dad on top of it. Like, I just remember how tired. I mean, I'm still exhausted. Like,
Yeah,
at 2 a.m. last night for an hour and a half, and I'm beat. So, like, I remember that early stage though. It was incredibly rough. So, like, how did you handle all of that together?
a key bonus feature about me, or problem, depends on who you talk to, is I don't wake up. Like, when I go to sleep, that's it. So when Carter was fussing in the middle of the night, if Mariah did not wake me up, I slept like a baby.
Which, by the way, I hate that saying, because I have a baby. They don't sleep well. Like, why is that?
I have a 3-year-old who doesn't sleep well. He's up, like, we have probably had 3 nights maybe not even 3 nights, that he's gone to bed at 8 p.m. and woken up any I mean, it's typically he goes to bed at 8. He like needs some sort of resettling at around 10:30 or 11. And and then you get bits and stretches and things like that. And like, early on people will say, "Oh, it's because, as their brain develops, they've unlocked a new feature and they'll wake up and they'll be blowing bubbles and it's so cute." It's like, right. Yes. But like we are 3 years in, and he's unlocking new features every day and every night and multiple times. And yeah, sleeping like a baby, I think it was really good advertisement to get people to have children.
It's a
And
cruel joke is what it is.
yeah, I mean, I would think it was also like what is that, eating like a bird, or birds that eat like 2.5 times their weight. So that's another one that's really frustrating. It's like when I was told I eat like a bird, it's like, do I or do I not? Um, and yeah, these things are it's a faux pas, I guess they call that.
So you were at least getting some sleep then,
It's
but
getting some sleep,
that's still a
and
lot on your plate.
it was a lot. So I'm really thankful. I've got the West Coast is managed by Chris, who's been with CAD since 2012. And it took, see, when we last spoke, it was probably about 2 years, a year and a half into fully running the second facility. And being able to, it took about 6 months for that transition to be able to put on somebody, um, you know, all the things that you think the people you work with know that is actually in your head starts to come out, especially when you want accountability. So that the West Coast has been a place that we've been able to just maintain. The East Coast, it's still building. I would say one of the largest problems is me, in any portion that I run, because it's this pride, ownership, things like that, and not being okay at times to just say, I don't have to do this. The last time we spoke, I said that I hadn't run anything on the lathe, and I still have not. I've run things. I've been the guy who comes in on a Saturday and hits cycle start and loads material, but I really haven't done. I haven't programmed a part on the lathe. And I've been taking the time the last 18 months to pull myself out of programming in general. And being able to do that and being able to delegate more. And delegating is not giving something to somebody and then telling them how to do it. Delegating is giving somebody something to do and then being there to answer questions. Micromanaging is the one that I'm more familiar with. It's like, can you do this? No, don't do it that way. Do it this way. No, don't do it that way. So it's like two people doing, tugging,
One
trying
person's
to,
task. Yeah.
yeah. And you're playing tug of war with your own, staff to get to the finish line, which doesn't actually work. So I've been learning that, and really the best way to do that is to sit on your hands. So really, for the being able to teach and run a company, I would say that the profitability of the company was stagnant for the 2 years that I taught, and I think that it was one of those things that I really wanted to know how education was going in the real world, and really at the high school level. We have a huge issue with advertising in manufacturing. I'm gonna say that there's been some good movement in that in the last probably 18 months. We've got there's people in the industry that are not not your standard manufacturing voices that are starting to be voices of manufacturing, who are getting the cool quotient out there and making it so it's more accessible and more diverse and things like that. But I think like what we really need is we need more of that for the education, for somebody who's in fifth grade to see manufacturing as something they want to do. So I mean, I think that ultimately what got me through teaching and doing it is because I have this idea that, at the end of the day, you are capable and able to do, only so much. And being able to, I don't know if it's a legacy thing or just a want to be, to show people how neat manufacturing is. And I said this the last time, if I did drugs, manufacturing would be my drug, or building parts would be my drug.
Mm-hmm.
I just really enjoy how much it gives you, like how fulfilling it is for a hands-on person to, start with a billet of something, or even just to design if you're into 3D printing and actually have a tangible object. Nothing against somebody who enjoys software and coding and things like that. I mean, I really think that is really important, because I couldn't build parts the way I know how to build parts without software. But, you shut down a computer and turn it up on again, and it's magic that it works. I mean, I'm seeing you on a computer screen, and 20, 30 years ago, it'd be like, what are you talking about? So we have this ability to do all these things. And I think that it was stressful being all three of those things at the same time. What it really was is trying to figure out, like, my idea about manufacturing and about the troubles in hiring, any troubles in retention, is the fact that it's not a thing. Manufacturing is not a thing in conversation. So being able to get a team together that helps support that, I'm going, like, I'm in the shop having meetings, I'm building parts, and I'm going to school, because it's really important for me to help understand and help bring manufacturing to more people. So the way I did that was the support from my team, the support from my wife, and the support from friends when it was a bad day. Like, I took on this job and I talked to Tim Paul, and he gave me some people to talk to, and some of those people had gone through it and gotten over the education bug, but were really helpful in being like, this is what's going to happen, and mark my words, like, there will be one day that there is a student that is going to do something that you didn't think was even possible, and there will be another student that will make it the whole reason why you did it. So, I mean, that's kind of like a long story long, but really it's people make it so people can do what people are good at doing.
Right. So then you said you taught for 2 years. What changed after the second year?
So, I mean, I taught for 2 years. The first year I taught because I was asked to. The second year I taught because I wanted to know if the first year was difficult because it's difficult, or difficult because it was, students are learning a new thing. And what it comes down to is that teaching is the most difficult job that you can do, period, because they're not your children. You can't not feed them. No. And I mean, it's just really difficult, because for somebody who's compassionate and passionate about individuals, your stress is the stress of your students. Mm-hmm. And then you have your life, and then you have, your family life, and then you have, for me in particular, your business. And it was going to be too much. And I couldn't say I'm going to teach full time, because I couldn't afford life. And I didn't believe that, given the way that public education works, I could not continue to educate. I would be more beneficial as taking students on as co-op students in trajectory than I was to, teach 10 students. And then the second year I had more students. I had 12 students the second year. And one of the things that happens is there's educators that have been doing it for 20 plus years, that the students are really going to class for that teacher. They're not necessarily they're partly going for the information, but we have educator in the tech community in Vermont. His name is Chris Gray, and he has taught at the high school level and the college level. And if you're in manufacturing in the state of Vermont and somebody says Chris Gray, there's going to be somebody who knows who he is.
Oh, wow.
He's also part of the American Precision Museum, and most of his students go on from his manufacturing classes to engineering school, and that's huge. And one of the things is like he's been doing it for 27 years, and that is a huge commitment. And I know that I could not commit to that level and also commit to my team and commit to my family. So it became after the first year, I decided I would do it one more year.
Okay.
And it was pretty early in the year that I gave my notice so that they could have enough time to find a new educator to take that program over. And unfortunately, it goes back to, pulling somebody into that role. Every single person that I've ever spoken to would have to take a significant pay cut to become an educator. And that, the healthcare, I think, adds probably about $20,000 to that $50,000, salary.
Right.
Because it's really, really good. But if you're if you're young and you don't really need Cadillac health insurance,
right, then it's not a giant boon. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if you don't continue to teach, you're not necessarily going to get those benefits, the retirement benefits.
Right. So you stopped teaching and then thought like, I don't have enough to do. Let me buy another company.
No, so it was actually more like a student came in who was at a co-op at a company and said, I'm going to have to find a new job because the company I'm working at is closing. So a problem solver here. Let's create more problems. So the company has been around since 1957. Mm-hmm. And they were wire forming and progressive die stamping. So stamping and forming. If you don't know what a wire former is, Google it. I will not even begin to specifically a 4-slide. I could not do it justice. And most of the videos you're going to see are going to be from 4slide.com and maybe eBay for one that's for sale. Technology has been around for a long time. It's high volume production. So the business, at that point, the current owner of the business had started in 1962 as an employee there. And she and 2 other partners bought it from the original, the founder of the company. And she was the last woman standing. So about 10 years ago, she had taken over, she had become the sole owner. So for, 62 years, she worked in the same place, built an incredible team. And then in just about 80 years old, it was time for her to make a change and actually retire. And the stamping portion of the business, she was able to find a buyer for. And a local company bought it and took many of the employees. And of that section of the business. Now, the 4-slide portion of the business was not as attractive to that same business because, a 4-slide has moving mechanical parts external to everything. There's guards on these machines, but things are moving. And they're, so you can look at it as saying, oh, it's going to be a safety thing. But really what it is it's really difficult to teach how to set one up. I mean, you're creating dies, you're striking material. One of the fascinating things is we're often will have 20,000 pounds worth of material come in and ship 20,000 pounds worth of parts. So essentially you're just taking a piece of material and you're turning it into a different shape and you're selling the material at an added, you're adding some work to it and you're selling it as just the same thing. Right. Wire turns into wire that's been formed.
So you just brought up an important point or an important question. Why did you see any value in it? If the company locally that was buying part of the company was like, nah, this isn't for us. Why? Like, what went through your head where you were like, this is a good buy. This is something I can turn into a production side of CAD.
So this is a 35,000 square foot industrial facility that has, when I took it over, 14 full-time employees. Some of them have been working there for 40 plus years. So for me, there are no YouTube videos of how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great work ethic, a great team here in place that really wants to continue and really wants to pass this on. So if I can take this over and do it right, I can get that information and help these people leave their legacy and continue something, because because the company's been around for so long and we used to make a lot of hardware. For those of you who don't, like, the easiest way to explain it is that most four-slide parts are the noise. So if you think about tearing apart any device, and the things that you don't care about tend to be formed parts. So screw eyes, if you take any picture frame off your wall, chances are there's a four-slide part that's holding the picture up. If you've ever hung drapes in your house, there's a four-slide part. If you ever put a screw eye or one of those latch systems that goes on a gate, that's a four-slide assembly. But those aren't things that you think about being made. That's not a laptop. That's not an iPhone. It's the noise.
Right.
And because the business has been around so long and produced all those things, I also believed that we were at the right time to be able to bring a lot of that manufacturing back domestically. Almost every hardware store in the country carried parts that were made by this company. And that stuff went overseas in the 90s. I have the books going back to 1957. So I can tell you, and the customers, and I can tell you, you can look at the customer base and you can look at what happened historically in manufacturing, and you can figure out kind of what happened. So anyway, I didn't go after it so much as this could not be the business that their retirement, because there's definitely costs associated with it. But really what it was is that passion about being able to build, to get new people involved, and also because of the size of the facility and the ISO, being able to add subtractive manufacturing to it. And then working with the team, it was an incredibly solid team there to get, to help them pass this stuff on. And again, it's a rural area. Being able to offer decent jobs in the rural area is good, but also being able to continue a legacy. So the promise that I made to the owner of the company is that I would build the company back and keep the name and maintain as much as I could. It's been a very, very expensive endeavor. I would say that the stamping portion of the business was 80% of the revenue.
Oh, wow.
And I still, to maintain everything, needed 50% of the employees that were there. On top of that, it's a very large facility because it's raw steel and things like that. It has to be climate controlled. You don't want moisture in raw steel. We all know what that happens. If you live in the Northeast, you know every day where you are. You probably don't know what happens when steel gets wet.
Doesn't stay wet long.
So, I mean, the whole purpose of this is to, it did create a significant problem. Does make things expensive, but also is to build something again back to what it was. I mean, the business was capable. It started with 4 slides. It is completely possible to keep, to have the 4-slide division produce enough parts to stay afloat, but we added subtractive manufacturing to that for higher production. So that's where our MAM went and things like that. I mean, it's we had to do that because the 4-slide cutting it. So
Well, let's talk about changes you've made and things you had to do once you took over such a long-standing business. I know you had some personnel changes that you had to make. You had to bring in, ERP or any kind of modern job tracking. You now have added a MAM. Talk me through all of those decisions and like how that goes down. Because I imagine even just taking over a company that's that long standing, you said most of the employees had been there a very long time. I imagine just doing that is tough as it is.
that was definitely difficult. Working with the team, I spent from May until November working there every day, to work with the team and to see if it was going to be a good fit, because I didn't want to step into something that was going to explode. I couldn't afford to do that. So I had a lot of meetings with the staff trying to figure out what was going on, pain points. And like, if you sit back and you're really honest with yourself, many of the things that you do in manufacturing are because that's how you know how to do it. When you go to other shops, you can see how other shops do things, and sometimes you're like, oh, really? You can do it that way? So you learn a lot. And one of the things that I will say about this endeavor was finding out, like, this was part of manufacturing I'd never seen before. I mean, I've done a tour of this facility, but I've never seen how these things make parts. So zero idea if the whole shop shut down and I was left with the equipment, it would be of scrap value because there'd be no way I would have the time to learn it. So really being able to talk to the staff and figure out, make sure that they wanted to stay on, and what it would take and things like that, and then understanding from the current owner, um, the fact that it had built to be what it is. There wasn't a total understanding of what it would take once the stamping had moved out. That was kind of a surprise to everybody. But what ended up happening is being able to cross train individuals. We took over the company, had an EDM, and that EDM died right at takeover. So a company that needs an EDM to survive, we ended up at IMTS. I had gone through and decided to do EDM shopping. So we ended up with a Makino EDM, which meant that the person who was trained on the EDM, new piece of equipment, like this is no longer something that I know how to do. So retraining there, cross-training other employees how to use a new piece of equipment, and then realizing that this could be a revenue center instead of a cost center, because the EDM was used to build tooling. And since the stamping portion had left, about 80% of the tooling requirements had left, I had the idea that we could possibly just outsource the EDM, but the number of times that you need it when you need it wouldn't have made sense. We would be down for days or weeks. So I ended up that was a good decision. So the team in the manufacturing, we have a full tool room, everything from grinding, way more bridge parts than I've ever been around in my life, heat treating, EDM. It's, really well-rounded tool room. It's a really clean setup, even though some of those bridge ports are twice my age. Maybe not twice my age. I'm getting older. But it's one of those situations where it's really great to have access to the knowledgeable staff there. So we adding that, and understanding that there are times when you have to building something, you have to make decisions of who's building it with you, who's building it against you, and what you can and can't afford. And there's as a business owner, you always I would say that I absolutely suck at the. I have friends who own businesses who anytime things start going wrong, they let people go. And we talked about this last time. It's like I really believe that everybody can be outstanding at what they do. They just have to have the want. And sometimes that want isn't at your facility. And that's okay, but I think everybody has to be an adult and talk about what it is that they're looking for. So there's some of those tough things that had to be done in order to make it so we could continue, and hopefully become profitable. So those things happened. We we are an ISO facility, which means that we have a quality management, but it's all analog. We started when we took over, jobs would come in the door, whether it was fax, we do have a fax machine, email, or snail mail. They would then be put into order card on a typewriter, an electric typewriter. So believe it or not, I guess it'd be a word processor because you can hit print. But essentially an IBM Selectric typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 5 of those. So jobs would come in, they would be typewritten, they'd be handwritten to go to production cards, and all of this is in an ISO manual. So that's one of those things where, as a prototype shop, it's like, just change how you do it. You can't just change how you do it. So there's a lot of those things that are like, oh yeah, well, smarty pants, you want to do this? Well, our system says that. But pretty quickly we had an ISO, like a interim audit, and I found out that all you have to do to change that is to change that in the ISO manual.
Right.
So we made
a revision. Yeah, you're fine to do it.
Yeah. So we made sure that we digitized that whole manual as well, and we have made multiple changes. So now, quote, an RFQ comes in and it goes directly into QuickBooks. We don't have an ERP system aside from Airtable and QuickBooks. I mean, QuickBooks is an ERP system. Let's just be honest with ourselves. They don't want to be called one, but it is, and it's a really great one for non-complicated businesses. Prototype businesses, it's a dumpster fire. You just put in, here's your invoice. We're still using paperless parts at CAD.
Mm-hmm.
We started working with a new ERP system recently called Carbon. Carbon, not Carbon, the 3D printer, Carbon, and they're a bootstrap company that's working on ERP specifically for job shops. And I think that that's one of those things where as you become production oriented, ERP becomes really important because you do need to resource plan. With prototype, you really do need to resource plan. But your resources are flying faster than some keep track. And I think that's why everybody wants to make an ERP system for a job shop. And when you say, oh, we build one, it's like, so I don't want to create the material that we're going to use for that because I don't want to have 600,000. And it's like, yes, we have 0 stock of 2,000 parts.
Right.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
We will.
I will always have that. And the number will continue to go up.
So we need ERP systems that cache and dump, and so production, we will probably get an ERP system for that. And if it is Carbon, it'll be very easy for Carbon to be that ERP system because we will have experience with that. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I did do is we share some key staff between both companies. Sam, who is one of my prototype people at CAD, he is transitioned primarily to be production over at HEB. And then my admin, Robin, she spends her time at wherever the fire is hottest or coldest. I don't know which way to put that, but she spends a lot of time chasing the fires that I light.
Right. Yeah.
Apparently is something that I'm really good at. She's really good at not telling me that I'm lighting fires. But anyway, so that's, we really decided that we needed to double down and make the production facility a production facility, and keep those two separate. So in some ways, CAD is one larger organization, but when you start to put in, like, if this is going to be built over the production facility, it's going to run through the inspection department, which means it is going to be the lead time plus 4 days or
Right.
5 days or however that is.
So then why did you choose? I mean, the MAM makes sense for production, but it sounds like you didn't have the work for the MAM. That seems like a big investment.
So
right off the bat.
I kind of had the work for the MAM at CAD.
Oh.
But the work for the MAM at CAD was basically a conversation. So we have at CAD, the last time we spoke, we have had the Haas UMC 750 with a AX4, which I will say the AX4 is still running brilliantly. The UMC 750 is showing the age of running automation for so long. We've we've replaced a spindle and a spindle motor. We've replaced y-axis rails. I will still say it is a phenomenal machine for the prototype world. It is a Ford F-150, and it is phenomenal. The Haas, you can replace it for, I don't know what a new UMC is, but under 220,000. But the MX850, we brought that in, and I quickly realized that I was going to need automation. So we got an AX4 on order, and we ordered that. We brought it in, and I was able to meet great people through that. CNC repairman Aaron Morrill, he was the guy who did the setup on that machine. Oh, nice. So we ended up again with the Shunk, because of Trinity, the Shunk Vero OS system. The AX4 uses a 3-puck system and a 1000i Fanuc robot, so pretty good payload at the machine or at the robot. I think end effector is limited to 160-ish, 170 pounds. Wow. I will stretch that, but I can't advertise what we've stretched it to. And it's a 22-inch square that I can load and unload. So pretty good size. The MX850 can do a 850 millimeters, 34 inches. It's a really big machine. It does really big stuff. Right. But it's front load because it's a Matsuura. So there's times where the robot's in the way. Right. So anyway, we kind of had projects lined up and eating time on that. So every night we would run it. And if the work that we were doing, prototype work, couldn't, we were having to swap out tools from day to night. And so I decided to bite the bullet and do this MX, kind of relieve some time off the prototype machine to bring in a real production machine. And I will say that a Matsuura is an absolute dynamite machine. It is very, very difficult to take what you know about machining and then be a fast-paced prototype machine shop owner and then apply that to production machining. Right. So the learning curve for that for us has been huge. I've said this time and time again, and I laughed at myself listening to episode 135 when I said this is how I typically do things. I buy a piece of equipment, finance the equipment, and then make the money to spend the money on the tooling and the work holding. Now the MAM has 330 tool slots and 32. So we got a 42V, so it's basically an MX420 and 32 pallet system. And Sam came up with a riser to go to adapt to a Shunk. But, the first thing we did was we took tools out of the MX850 that we were using to run production, because how do you make parts? Well, you need tools. Mm-hmm. So we had 330 possible tools with maybe 23 tools in there. It basically looks like, like a public library in there. Right. Yeah. There's a lot of homeless and not very many tools. Poor public libraries. So anyway, so we started running that production work over there, and we have a client that we've been working with who's been giving us more of that production work. Their business is going well. So we've increased the volumes on that equipment, but it's really what's taxing is, the redundant tooling and all that stuff. That's where we should go. So we need to spend more money on that. And, that came to the next kind of big learning curve is like, I hadn't adjusted pricing for several years. I've spoken to other machine shop owners, and there's another end of last year's rake I stepped on is understanding that you can't do the work that you're doing if you're cheaper than China. Um, and
just not for very long.
You can, exactly. You can, but unless your staff is also willing to do that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's and China has also invested heavily in automation. So, they're not feeding people, they're feeding robots. So you turn the power off and they stop being fed. You do that on people and they call that murder. So anyway, there's that. But one of the big things is, so the machine was delivered it was late. It was maybe early last year. And by the time it was running, it was almost like running full lights out with no issues. It was probably almost 5 months.
That's not too bad.
Well, you say that's not too bad, but when you're used to it's on the floor and it's running, just a single station, if you buy a Haas, it really is like it's if you got your ducks in a row,
parts if you want to, yeah,
yeah. I mean, and if you really want to on a Haas, you don't even need to have it leveled. It'll make almost as high quality parts of the
right.
But
slap it down so it doesn't rock, and then call it a day.
Yeah. So it's really like when you're talking about a machine that's almost $1 million. You can do the math on anyone who has ever done a machine payment. You can do the math, and if paying for a piece of equipment for 6 months and it's not building parts, it's very expensive.
Right.
And it's such a difficult thing to be, looking at that, and, you become resource strapped in a hurry. Resource strapping turns into
you at the same time, didn't you?
Yeah, but the Swiss was kind of a sponsored thing with one of the companies we work with. Really, just they needed help with doing the Swiss work.
Okay.
It was in their way, so we took on the Swiss and the work that went with it.
Still, that's a lot of change all at once.
Yeah, so that was huge. And then it's really, there's a huge difference in making 1 or 10 parts really well, because tool life is really not in your equation. As soon as you start getting volume parts, your tool life has to be in the equation, because costing off a tool for 10 parts is fine. Costing off the same volume of tools for 100 parts becomes, you're no longer competitive. And then if you're no longer competitive, you don't have the job. If you don't have the job, then you don't need the machine. And then, you've got a really expensive boat anchor.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of that learning, fundamentals of learning things that you should know, but you don't know because you've never done it.
Mm-hmm.
I see that all the time with my kid. You can't turn the steering wheel to 90 degrees while riding your bicycle down a hill. No, you just did. You can technically do that.
You just should. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would, there's those things that we learn, and it's too bad that, you learn at the cost of sleep and things like that. So,
right.
We've done a lot of that. Adding the man was big. Adding the second, a third facility is big. We've our first Vermont hire left us because he moved to North Carolina.
Right.
We've got still a good solid team. My core team in California has been unchanged for almost a decade.
Wow.
In Vermont, we've got a solid core team there. We've got there's times where it's like one of the most difficult things in hiring people is the training time. So I do want to hire more people, but it's where that time comes from. When you're looking at, cash flow, that you really have to take into consideration of how much time is it going to take to train somebody, but how much burden is it going to put on staff, which equates to cost.
Right.
And I learned this thing, which is one boy is a boy, two boys is half a boy, and three boys is no boy at all. Which essentially means that when you're training somebody, you lose the trainee because they don't know anything, and you lose at least 50% of capacity of the trainer.
Yeah.
And that's why I think many manufacturing facilities have a lot of people sweeping the floor, is because that individual is being asked the trainer's being asked to produce at the same level and train somebody. So they train somebody how to sweep the floor.
Right.
And as you will learn with your automation, you will see that the automation is going to open up capacity in some way, shape, or form, and that capacity is yours to do what you want. I spoke recently at a modern machine shop thing, and I started it by asking everybody in the room who owned a washing machine. And believe it or not, everybody, or who uses a washing machine to wash their clothes, and everybody did raise their hand. Could consider that automation. You automated washing your clothes. You were fully capable of running down to the nearest river and beating your clothes against a rock. Unfortunately, you cannot do that because you don't have water. But you have plenty of rocks.
Right. Right.
And that's the thing, is what we've tried to sell is the fact that our automation is freeing up some time where we're still using that time to do prototype running, and educating people, bringing people up for that. And the time that you gain from automating something it's your responsibility to decide what to do with that time. And I think that's where things get really sticky. The idea that automation is going to free everybody's time to do stuff, I think is, you name it, dishwasher, robot vacuum, robot lawnmower. You're at some point you're supposed to be able to sit and watch TV, right? All these, you've now freed up, what does a washing machine do? It frees up, depending on high efficiency, frees up 2 hours.
Right.
Low efficiency frees up 45 minutes. So pick your efficiency.
Yeah.
But we're still doing just as many things. Dishwasher, I don't actually think those fundamentally do anything but make you do dishes 3 times. You got to pre-do them, put them in the dishwasher. You got to take them out of the dishwasher. But that's the thing that happens, is you start to learn where you can gain the time back and what you can do with that. So, when you're loading an automation cell, that's pretty easy stuff to delegate to somebody.
Right.
But being able to figure out what exactly you do need somebody to do. You listed your business cards of things that your business does well. I think doing a time study with everybody and figure out what it is they spend their time doing, and trying to find people who want to fit in roles that are those things that people do. That there are certain things in a shop that people just want to do. They don't want to have the higher level migraine of programming parts, but they do enjoy, prepping material, cutting it, deburring, things like that. There are days that I would much rather debur parts than program and and run a business.
Have those, yeah, for sure.
And I think that's one of the things that you can then use, that you find the skill match. But again, we go back to the fact that our industry is blue collar ish and white collar ish, and you can't do the blue collar ish stuff without the experience,
right?
Unless you really do want to run through a field full of cast offs from a rake manufacturer, because I don't care how much data you have, or choose the end mill manufacturer, call it GAR, quarter inch and you throw in a helical quarter inch, they're going to do two very different things.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to know that is by experiencing the utter hell of bleeding ears from switching cutters to the wrong, one way or the other.
Right.
And that destroys the surface finish. So,
Yeah.
we decided, we decide what to do with our time. So I think that's fundamentally what the decision is, but you still do lose. So yeah, even though we're going to be continue to hire, we need to figure out, how we're going to do that without taxing everybody to the nth degree.
Right.
And just, you have to set expectations at day one. Like, this is what we want for you, and this is about how long it will take. And if you don't do some homework, it will take longer. Yeah, it's my so we're heading back to California tomorrow, and
To Vermont?
Yeah, to Vermont.
Okay.
We're in California. But my wife just sent me a message asking, so Carter's gotten to the point where he's not napping. Like, he's capable of powering through and it not being the worst idea in the world. And he's more often powering through. And it's like, he still needs a nap.
Mm-hmm.
But if you doesn't get a nap by 1, there's this sleep window that my wife says that exactly what it is. And I was like, no, that can't be right. He only napped for 20 minutes. It's something like 8 hours. Or I don't know exactly what it is. She'll kick me for not knowing. But it's just one of those things where it's, if it's 4:00 and he takes a 20-minute nap, you're up till 10:30 with him. Like, if it's a 2-hour nap, you're up till 10:30. It doesn't matter. Whenever he wakes up, you've got X number of hours before he will go to bed.
Yeah.
And if you try to do it sooner than that, then you can, just both be miserable, because he will be wound for sound and you will be, I am able to put him to bed at that point better because I will fall asleep and then it is boring for him.
Yeah.
When
you said it earlier that, like, on the whole, you wouldn't trade it for the world, but that, like, there are many days like that really resonated with me. The last have been really tough. Like, Molly got her first 2 teeth over the last couple of weeks. She started to stand and, like, pull herself up to standing all of a sudden. And it's just like, it's been a fucking, she's just like, been waking up at 2 a.m. pretty consistently, like, not every night, but probably 2 or 3 nights a week now. And just, like, is up for 45 minutes. And we try to give her, another bottle, and maybe that works. And it's like I did today.
I mean, I think basically having a child and trying to make an analogy for a machine shop would be like having somebody else do everything the opposite way that you're trying to do it. I tell Carter times and time again, it's like, I know you don't want to go to bed, but at some point going to bed will be the best part of your day.
Yep.
Man, there's certain things where it's like, it is, the other day. So he's, I say that moms get to be moms, like, as soon as they know that they're pregnant, and dads get to be dads somewhere around the age of 3.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe it's different for every father, but so my brother owns a boat in the Bay Area, and it's got twin Volvo 300 horsepower motors in it. And Carter's grandfather has a farm, and so he's used to tractors and things like that and animals. So we go into the engine room, and it is like, Carter can stand up at a little under 3 feet tall. He can stand up. I, at a little over 6 feet, cannot do anything but just kind of like be hunched over. And my brother is probably 5'5" or 5'6", and he's a little bit more comfortable down there, but he's sitting between these two big green motors. And he says to Carter that, Carter asks the question, how much horsepower do these have? Because we were talking about it. And he said they have 310 horsepower each. And Carter thinks about this for a second. And he says, that's a lot of horses. and then he proceeds to go along that path, and David, my brother, says, well, what do you think would happen if you had that many horses on a boat? And he said they would need a lot of hay. And it's it's one of those things where it's like, that is so true. And then the question came up with, like, how do you think 600 horses could go as fast as this boat? And he said, yes, with one of those motors on them. So like his logic is that this is a lot of horses that are in this boat, and you need a lot of hay. And the only way that a horse can go that fast with that much hay is with a motor.
That is so good.
Yeah. There's certain things that are just like, you can't make it up. Mm-hmm. And they're the funniest things. And they make up for like at least 4 hours a week of the every funny thing it makes up for, and there's way more funny things, but there are times when it's just like you just wonder why there are humans.
Oh yeah it's insane, absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much fun of because you get to watch somebody learn, but you also have to understand that they're learning even when you're not teaching. And they are sometimes learning things that you would never want, a 1, 2, 3-year-old to learn.
Right.
Whether it's words or how to stand on top of something, on top of something, on top of something to do something. It's like, whoops.
Yeah. That they become I've heard, I mean, obviously Molly's not doing it yet, but I've heard they become a perfect mirror of your behaviors.
Yes.
Really learn what you're like around people.
Yeah. It is so funny. I mean, there's a certain point of it. So, there's certain things with growing up. Carter got a Strider bike. So one of those balance bikes at about 18 months. And he started walking at just about his first birthday.
Okay.
And the Strider bike was one of those things where it's like, this will be unlock a new feature, and he really enjoyed it. And we have one in California and one in Vermont. And at our place in Vermont, there's 3 kids who live down the road who are like 2.5, 4, and 7. And Carter saw the 2 older kids riding pedal bicycles, and he at Carter at 2.5 became like determined that he was going to get a bike with pedals. So it was one of those things where it's like, no way. But it's like, okay, well, if we get him a pedal bike, it's not like he won't use it if he can't do it now. So at 2.5, we got him a pedal bike, and 45 minutes, I assembled it, went to work, and 45 minutes later, I get a video from my wife, and he is pedaling, no training wheels, pedaling a bike.
No shit.
And like, she is running after him. He's like, went from pedaling to, or like, Strider to pedaling to like going really fast. And the same thing happened from like walking to sprinting. Mm-hmm. You're all of a sudden like, where did they go? Yep. And it's phenomenal, but also like the prefrontal cortex, the one that's in charge of the decision making, not cool at 2.5.
No.
Like, so
it was the same thing with Molly starting to stand recently. Like, she went from showing no interest in it at all. We were out with some of Katie's friends getting drinks, and we were just like all sitting on a couch and like a few chairs and stuff. And all of a sudden I look over and she had pulled herself up on the back of the couch and was standing, and we're like, what? And then like, I was like, cool. So I've got a lot of work to do this weekend of baby proofing everything, because all of a sudden now it's important. and like I dropped her crib so that, you know, she was actually not going to be able to yeet herself over the edge. And like within a day or two of that, she was like pulling herself up in her crib and staying. I'm like, well, I'm glad I did this. I'm glad we figured it out, but like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah. No, and that's just, unlocked a new level.
Oh yeah, it's like you're simultaneously so proud and terrified all at once. You're like, oh, things just got a little harder.
Yeah.
Like I remember when she started, like she doesn't fully crawl yet. She does like the army crawl,
Yeah.
but she's quick at it. And she went from like this cute potato that I could put on any surface and she wouldn't go anywhere to like, I can't leave her in the center of my bed alone for more than 1 second. Otherwise, she's like trying to go off the edge towards me. And it's like, oh, goodness, this is, yeah, it's something.
That's one of those instances where you actually start to teach the like, get close to the edge of the bed, rotate, and like the way that is safe, because like they learn that stuff so quickly. But then the problem is they're under the bed or under the couch or on is like, they go. I mean, knock on wood, haven't lost the child yet.
But you can see why pretty quickly. You're like, yeah, all right. I always gave parents so much shit for it, and then now it's like, you probably just turn your back for like 30 seconds and they're gone. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you had siblings, but I had siblings. My mom told me the story that my brother let me outside and closed the door and said, "Bye bye, baby." And there's those things that happen too. Like, you know, because I was the second child, there had to be a little less watching, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's put the 18-month older one in charge.
Oh boy.
Yeah. It's yeah. So raising babies and running machine shops, I think that they're about the same.
I can see it. All right. Well, let's jump back into it. We were talking about the MAM automation. We were talking about training and how automation kind of unlocks a little bit of that.
It allows the ability, like as the leader or as your team, your team has to get on that. Like that's the thing that they want to do. You have to like carve out that as like you could just say, okay, now we're automated. We make more parts. We make more money. Mm-hmm. And then you can automate yourself into retirement. And then that's the fundamental issue is like, well, the company that I took over, one of the things that I saw was like as they got better and stronger at what they did, at the peak they had 90 employees.
Wow.
And they were capable, like they started automating, like creating automated solutions. And what we're talking about automation is we're actually talking about like controlled chaos. There's certain ways that you can get a part to do something in order to automate it's the way it does, the way that you produce it. And when you're building, like our typical order is 100,000 to 1 million parts. And when you're able to see a job that comes up a couple times a year, you're able to take that whole thing and build an apparatus to manufacture it. Like you can invest that time to make your life easier. But some of those things made it so like a position was no longer needed. So a screw eye, so it's got an eye on one hand side and a shaft on the other. Mm-hmm. And there are CNC wire formers that can produce those parts, but the classic, somebody who does Swiss machining will say that, an old cam-driven machine can be faster than a CNC because, mechanics do run faster than computers. But so the job, those shaft, so eye and a shaft that gets threaded, would go into a threading machine, and that somebody used to sit on top of a stool and run it down a chute for it to get threaded. And then they created an automatic feed for that. So, we had 20 threaders, so 20 positions were essentially transitioned into different roles. And as people retired, just that role was no longer needed. They didn't, so they had less people doing the same amount of things. And if you don't take that time and educate, like reinvest in new people, like if you have, you know, good stick to itiveness for your staff, you can just retire your entire company out, which
Right.
is kind of where the company was going, and it's too bad because our newest setup person started in '87.
Jeez.
So, and that's kind of it's great. I mean, somebody's been there since '87, but the one who's been there the longest started in '71. Um,
So how does this workforce feel about these new machines then? Like,
they love it
really?
because, like, I mean, it's one of those things where I was kind of afraid. One of the big things is like you hear about the dirty, dark, dangerous, curmudgeonly, like nobody wants anybody to learn. And this group of people is just like, no, give us people to teach. We love this things. They've always been kind of an adaptive company, but they
That's
just haven't
wild though. Like I
needed.
would never have guessed that that would be the response you would get from this group.
Yeah, and I mean, in the tool room, we did have an individual that had that. I want to do it the real way.
Mm,
I don't want to build it that way. I want to build it the real way. And that, to me, that was really tough to have that conversation of like, I don't think you would tell your wife you want her to make dinner the real way.
right.
I want you
You
to
have to go
get
wash your
food.
clothes the real way.
I'm not going to cook unless you get the food the real way. Like, where do we want to go with this? Because you better, if you're going to get food the real way, you need to take the day off.
Yeah, you already need to be hunting. You need to be out there right now, buddy.
So I mean, it's difficult because I think, and it goes back to the education and manufacturing. It's like all loops back to this, like the real way to build something, it is XYZ. I mean, and really to adapt and be humans, like, is the real way to get to work by walking, or is the real way to get into your way, your Uber or your Tesla and hit the autopilot, or
Right.
is it just to roll out of bed and telecommute?
Right. Right.
Like,
Exactly.
depends on your job. The real way is flexible, and we need to be flexible in how we do that. And I think that for the most part, the entire team has been like mesmerized by CNC equipment and how things are used, and really appreciative of, like, taking off the some of the stuff was individuals owned operations. Like, you don't touch that machine because you don't know, and like empowering people, um, is really important. And I don't think it was of any fault of any leadership. I think it was just like, you start a job in a large company and here is your workspace. And I had somebody say, yeah, I don't know what we do with waste oil. I just give it to Dwayne and it goes away. And I'm thinking, like, what does that mean? Because we're doing another environmental on this company, because it's one of those things, you property transfer,
Mm,
environmental.
right.
But they've done their preliminaries and haven't found anything. And really, what it was is Dwayne would go to the waste oil center, which is way in the back by the warehouse, and that's where it would go. But this
Mhm.
guy didn't know where stuff went.
Dwayne
So
eat
yeah,
it for all he knew. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like, here I'm thinking, like, is there a pit in the parking lot? No.
That's cool though. Like
Yeah.
that must have been very gratifying for you to like, or like to felt like you made the right choice, because like
Yeah.
that's kind of a unheard of amount of people to have that kind of mentality.
Yeah. And I think, but I think oftentimes it's just assumed. I mean, I had a conversation. So we have a night shift that, um, it's a two-person crew. Back at the height, they had like 15 people or 20 people on night shift, including tool makers. But and because of the volume of parts that was manufactured, I mean, so we're talking like parts are produced between 1,500 and 5,000 parts per hour. So if you're doing a roving inspection, 15 minutes can be a lot of scrap if things aren't going well. And if you have, a couple people on night shift and you've got a distance between equipment, it becomes really difficult to, do an inspection, full inspection, and walk back, when an inspection might take 5 minutes. So we had this instance where we had a piece of equipment that we needed to run, and in order to make it, for me, it's all about like, how can we get the revenue in the door? So that's parts out the door. And I was like, brought in the whole team and said, here's what's going on. We need to make a change. And they're like, let's move the machine. Um, and
I love it.
And it was a situation where it was like, okay, what's that going to take? And they said, well, it'll probably take a couple days. And this is the gentleman who said that he's the 4-slide supervisor. And he what I've learned now is he pads everything. So it was actually down. So they started at 6 in the morning and they were running parts by 2 p.m.
No way.
So, and it was a 4-slide with a threader, and it was, forklift orchestration. And it was just this, like, they moved it 150 feet and reassembled it, powered it back up, put air back to it. And like 3 guys in 5 hours. Is like, so why has this never been done? So, well, nobody asked.
So how automated are these 4-slide machines, like, once they're running?
So, I mean, they're producing a part. So you get a coil of metal, and depending, like, you can spec a coil of metal to come on, be a continuous coil, or, we have, what weight we're specifying. I think it's somewhere around, they can be on I learned this the hard way. They can be on a spool, which picture a spool of thread, or they can be a coil. A coil is around a coil stand, and they can separate, kind of like, a skein of yarn. You've got something that's manageable, and a spool is literally wrapped around, similar to what you would see when you go by a power line construction site. Where I learned that the hard way, because they asked me when I started ordering material which way I wanted it, and I ordered it the wrong way. And I ended up with this, I think, 1,100-pound spool of wire. And the way it's typically spec'd is like coil of certain number of pounds, which means they clip it. So you can have a spool or a coil of wire going until it runs out. You have to check parts to make sure that they're forming correctly. But they come down a chute into a box or a catch pan. And then, depending on if they're tumbled or if they're complete after doing that, they go into a box, and the box gets taped up. So it's really, really, for many of the parts are just like, they come off a coil and they go into a box, and then they're shipped. Some of the work does go out to, secondary. We do in-house tumbling, deburring, de-oiling. So, but there's times where, hardware needs to be zinc plated, or,
right,
whatever. Outside process, heat treated. So spring steel needs to be heat treated and, coated. But yeah, so it's very, very automated, but it's not. There is a counter, and there is no what we consider automation in manufacturing, a big yellow robot or pick your color robot type of automation. We're talking like industrial automation, and we're not talking about Alan Bradley. Had nothing to do with this.
Right. Yeah. No, that's awesome.
One revolution builds a part, and a 4-slide, all 4 corners are tied by like a gear system. It's just, it goes from one direction to another direction, and then you time everything with cams. So, I mean, they're wild machines, and if you like mechanical devices, they're one of the coolest things to watch.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to now, or fairly close to now then.
Yeah. So now is January of 2026. We've got we take a break between the beginning of or the end of December, so holiday shutdown, to wherever New Year's lands. And this year it just so happened, because Wednesday is a weird day. We shut down for 2 full weeks. Next year is going to be a little difficult because can you work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and take Thursday? And is it going to be a week off or a week and a half? But, I've been doing the holiday shutdown for, I guess, the last 12 years. The first 3 years of business, I did not IMTS, CES work, Consumer Electronics work show. So models for that. I realized after doing that for a couple of years that that was holiday murder. Like,
Yeah.
So I stopped.
Good.
Shut that down.
Well, then before we get on to the questions we have from the Patreon, you mentioned a new car that you're restoring.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not new. It's another. So I've been rebuilding Datsun Roadsters or Datsuns and for quite a while, and I have a Datsun Roadster that I picked up a couple years ago, and it takes a lot more time to do than it did when I had just one single site and no wife, no child. You know, and I wouldn't trade any of that stuff for anything else. But I got this car and I have just gotten it back from body. So typically takes me about 3 or 4 years to gather up the parts to rebuild a car, and then at some point about 18 months into doing that, I try to find a body shop. So I just got the car body back from paint, and it's going to be starting reassembly starting soon. My wife is doing she's getting her IBCLC, so becoming a lactation consultant, and she has an internship where every weekend from beginning or middle of January till end of April, she's going to be away. And Carter has convinced me that he is going to put the car back together.
Right.
He's got the right size hands for many small parts, but
Yeah.
he last night told me that I would do one side and he would do the other side. Which either means I need to give him very big gloves or pad the whole side of the car or figure something else out, because he's recently realized that when he's doing something he's not supposed to be doing, he tells me to go away. My wife recently found that he was putting things in his backpack that he wanted to take from one place to another, trying to be sneaky about that. So he's going to be pretty disappointed when all of those things that don't go carry on, that are, cars. I mean, they basically take a fleet of toy cars from one coast to the other. So yeah, that'll be fun. I haven't actually restored a car in it'll be 5 years. Business took precedent, child and other stuff. So
yeah. So when you do a restoration, are you just doing a pure restoration, stock engine, stock everything, or are you doing kind of resto mod stuff?
Mostly. I mean, so I'll have the internals. I'll modernize the internals of a car engine. I really do like old cars and how built things were. There's many components that I end up reverse engineering and then machining. So Datsuns were cheap cars. I mean, this car was $1,995, $1,995 brand new. And at the same point in time, a Porsche was probably three times that cost.
Right.
Which means that there's certain things that were pretty cheap. So the chrome plating on pot metal, zinc blisters, and all of a sudden you've got deteriorated. At this point, it's really difficult to find a chrome shop. So a lot of these parts I scan and then cut out of stainless steel.
Oh, cool.
And there's certain parts that just break over time. So I make them out of stainless, and it's it takes time, but at least I enjoy building new components. And every now and then somebody wants one, but you can't sell what you can build for the value of the component unless you're mass producing it. And I tell you, the number of times people have said, well, you can just build it because you built one. It's like, but if I have to charge you for my time, you won't be able to afford it.
Mm-hmm.
and I can't shut down what I'm doing to build something that's not going to pay for the time that we're losing. So,
Right. Yeah.
there's
One thing
times
is to
when I
push
wish
the
I got
project.
into Chevy Camaros but again, there's so many people producing parts for those.
Yeah.
So they'd be back in the same point. It's like, why do I want to compete with somebody who's already making parts for cheap?
Car stuff is just tough in general. Like, unless you're doing, you know, 60s, 70s, like Lambo and Ferrari parts, like the margins there are already so low that it's pretty.
Yeah. And then you're doing the Lambo parts where you've got a client base of 7.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and that's pretty difficult because then you can only build 8 of them.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it's tough to do it for anybody but yourself. I really don't need one, but I've been really trying to justify in my head buying a 3D scanner for car stuff because, like, both Brad and I are car guys and have projects, and I've been like, well, we'll get into it and what you've been researching, but like going down the rabbit hole of looking at how to make your own carbon fiber parts and making molds for that and all of that, and there's so much that I want to do that would be great with a 3D scanner, and it's like, yeah, but I don't need to spend 8 to 10 grand to
Yeah.
do what I want. So,
I mean, I think that's one of those things where I have a place that I use in the Bay Area, and they're all over the place, but they do that. You
mhm,
ship them the parts, and they create the CAD model, and it's not this knit together 55,000 triangles that you machine, and it's like, oh look, it's a diamond. I
right.
didn't want diamonds; I wanted a smooth surface. So they do all that work, and it's expensive, but I get a machine ready model that is plus or minus a thou from the original, which is really really nice. And I mean, there are things where you you see something and it'd be, oh, it would be super nice to have a better I have a I used to have Toyota trucks, and you find these companies that make top racks that are modular, but they don't form to the body. They're just
Mhm.
like a send cut send sheet metal. And it's like you could have at least press formed it to conform, not But
Right.
that's the thing is like how many people are going to care when the style is just a sheet metal,
Hmm.
and somebody's going to spend $600 on this, but will they spend eight, nine, 1,000, and how many is it going to take? So it's tough. Like, so I found that all the car stuff that I do is either for me or for clients that really understand that it takes time and it takes money, and there's variabilities. So it's and that doesn't keep the lights on.
Right. Well, speaking of Send Cut Send, our first question from Patreon, Jim Bolosic from Send Cut Send first asked you if you could start over and put your 2 facilities anywhere in the country, where would they be and why? And where would your third one be?
Well, so I really do think that having access to the tech industry that we do in the San Francisco Bay Area is really, really good for the company. That's where I started manufacturing, is in the Bay Area. Um, for a prototype, it really is. I wouldn't say it's imperative, but it's one of those things where now that there's social media and there's easier advertising internet, it is a lot easier to gain traction outside of that. um you know Jim's in Reno, or I believe that was his first facility. So I mean, it's not in the Bay Area, but he started a little bit more recently, and also with a model that's pretty different than a we started as a model shop,
Right. Well, and there's
models and
something to be said of
prototypes.
just proximity.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, so the Bay Area is really good for that. I would say that I would definitely, start, have a facility in an urban, you know, tech area. And then, but what I found is, because of the cost of living in an area like this, it's really difficult to hire and train people because of that need of hiring and training. So Bay Area is full of really, really highly technical people, and manufacturing takes highly technical and skilled people. And skill is gained through experience, and experience is gained through time. And to become, experienced with no time is a lie. And so for somebody to be able to afford to hire, startups do it all the time. They hire machinists that have enough experience to get their foot in the door, and then they pay them to learn kind of on the job and help them build, because they know way more than the individuals who are starting the tech company understand. And you have this situation oftentimes where those tech startups come and then they implode, and that new experienced programmer or prototype person is now left with needing a job. But so many of the machinists that I know, several of them that have been on your podcast, who have built companies, worked with companies, end up finding home in one of these high end tech shops, because the stress is a little bit less or different, or it's not your $1 million machine.
Right.
And I think that what I found is having the second facility starting in Vermont. It is easier in some ways to have a facility there, because the skills, the can-do attitude of, maybe it's the farming, maybe it's the less financially stability, but there's a lot less of the issue of you need to make a crap ton of money to live so you can afford to learn. And I think that if I was gonna, like, this, did try, and I said this on 135, I did look in Detroit and Philadelphia as well as Pittsburgh, um, because I was under the impression that urban meant good, and urban is good for, it's good for population, but more population doesn't necessarily mean more skill.
Right.
And more population may mean more business, but that can also mean more competition.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in the Bay Area, there's a lot of competition for highly skilled machinists. If you go to Austin, name a place that a tech company has opened their doors. Like,
right,
you'll have machinists attracted. And if you're in the Northeast, if you're in the Connecticut area, there's so much drive for electric boat, and the Navy's hiring, everybody's hiring, and people will move from one job to another, because again, go back to the training. We don't have enough people in the industry.
Right. Not to mention all the medical that's up there,
Yeah.
and that stuff too. Yeah.
So it's, I would put a third facility in an area where where you look at demographics. You need materials, you need people who have the problem solving mechanical aptitude skills. One of the things that I talked to somebody recently about is there's also this in the VC world, there's this idea that manufacturing still has blue collar problems. And I think that that's a difficult thing, but it is part of what happens. Is there are certain sectors of manufacturing that's very blue collar, and the problems associated with that, it's a negative connotation, and one of the reasons why money doesn't tend to follow, brick and mortar. But I would look at areas that have a good, whether it's a community high school or community college or technical college. But you need to have access to logistics too. So in Vermont, we have UPS and FedEx. They pick up daily between 4 and 5 p.m. But material suppliers are not as awesome when you're at least 2 hours from a material supplier. So McMaster-Carr, your materials costs go up, or your lead times go up if you're doing production. But those are the things. So if I was going to do another facility, I'd probably choose, somewhere, whether it be Kansas, Tennessee, somewhere South Virginia, maybe in an area that's lower population, close enough to logistics, and has material capabilities.
Mm.
And Jim, if you put a place there, you owe me a cup of coffee. Um,
All right. Well, his
so,
second question was, I love that your programmers can look out over the shop floor, separated only by a big piece of glass. What would be the biggest challenge you'd encounter if your programmers weren't on site?
so I think well, man, I want to say the biggest challenge there is that they aren't on site and our programmers also set up. But I think what really is the most difficult thing is like it's a culture thing in many ways where um, I don't even with people who work with each other, if you both open up each other's program, you're going to say, "What the hell are you doing?" Um,
Happens pretty frequently with Brad and I.
yeah,
Like, I'll open up his stuff to finish it or, look at it real quick. And I'm like, ew, why would you do it that way? And I've seen him do the same thing to my programs.
and so I think that the culture would have to be to accept it as like if you're I think Al at Toolpath once said like it's CAM assisting, it's not it's lifting to 80%. So if you're gonna not have your people on site, I think you either have to create the culture that's accepting of something that's different than the way you would do it, that's a cultural thing.
That's a
And
tough thing, though. That's even a
it
tough thing for culture to account for.
oh, it absolutely is. And I think that it really is so difficult because you are literally giving somebody the keys to your house and say like because a machine tool does not care about anything. It's like giving a 3-year-old the keys to your house and matches. Um, and the difficult thing is like you can as long as you use simulation, you can set up the roadblocks, the bumpers that are necessary to make that work. I mean, if you have a tool library that's robust and you have things like that, I am 100% confident that it is possible. I will say that the human portion of it makes it so that would be really difficult. I want to do it my way. So that's the cultural portion. I think again, like I have to look at our historical. Like we had a company and there was a company in Pittsburgh that wanted to do remote programming for manufacturing to democratize or whatever word you want, disrupt. That's another one that was trying to do that type of thing, and it was really difficult because you can't get that many people to do a startup thing and automate the whole system, so people do not touch the equipment. So I think you really need a good, solid team internally who's capable of taking a deep breath and saying, "I don't like it, but that will work." And then having a robust set of people outside that are willing to do that and hand you, and just say, this is my best effort at this is the tooling, but you really need experience. So you need people who have been in shops who understand work holding. No, I think you could do it. You could hire somebody that's a remote worker that's spent enough time in your facility, be it, if they were an experienced programmer, say 6 months on site working with your team and then going off site to be a remote programmer, I could see work. I mean, you probably do this yourself where you program parts and you come in the next day and you run them because you understand how your shop is set up. And it
Right.
doesn't matter if you haven't been in the office for 3 weeks, you still know that when you program a part that it's going to run on your equipment.
Mhm.
So I think that's the important thing.
Well, and I think it's tough too because, like, I've worked with a lot of really fantastic setup people that don't question it because they don't know how to program,
Yeah.
but they don't question it too because they have a level of trust with their programmers.
Right.
And I think it's really hard to establish that kind of trust with an offsite relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's why having a team that's comes together and understands like what they're doing is really important because you essentially, I mean, imagine going in for surgery and never meeting the doctor in person. I wouldn't have a problem going in for a remote surgery if I had actually talked to the doctor, understood that, what the words that they say mean. But,
Mhm.
I worked at a company that had set up people, and those people would trust you. But if you ever said you did something wrong and they didn't do something wrong, they would like that relationship is now gone.
Right.
And I could see a remote programmer um, blaming a setup person, in a heartbeat, and then it's tit for tat. And the person on site, you know, if they might not be paid as much as the remote programmer, and then there's this like, posturing BS, blah blah blah. So
Yeah.
90% culture. No, 90% culture and 90% trust. 20,
Right. Yeah.
20%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's that totally possible. And I would want to see that as a possibility. I mean, it's people are doing it with sort of doing it with Toolpath and Cloud NC, but they're still just looking at it and saying, yeah, cool, but I wouldn't do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to reassign that. I'm going to send Justin an email saying this stuff is dumb, but I'm never going to try it. And that also is one of those things. It's like I remember early on in my programming, so I using SurfCam, it auto populates feeds and speeds. I don't know why Hypermill. You and I are both down the Hypermill path, but Hypermill is like, what do you mean material? Like this is all on you. You don't know fundamentals. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's your problem. It's like, but it's a half-inch end mill. It should have like some sort of standard parameters. But SurfCam had like you choose the material, you choose the tool, it sets up its own stuff. And early on, I had chosen a 1/4-inch end mill, 303 stainless, and I accidentally didn't correct the auto-populated. I think it was 11,000 RPM and 115 inches a minute. And this was back in probably 2006 when I was working with a bunch of older people who had been programming and were like 150 surface footage is what you run in steel. Um, and I hit go, and all of a sudden the 1/4-inch end mill came down and it was ripping through stainless like it was aluminum, and I was like, oh, it worked. So now I am more apt to trust things that I don't understand, and
Mhm.
and sometimes in training I'll have staff do something that I look at and I'm like, no friggin' way would I do it that way. But if you don't allow somebody to do something in a way that you wouldn't do it, never learn. And as long as it's not going to kill the machine or hurt somebody or ruin a deadline, I think it's really important to get outside of your comfort zone. So I would say that totally possible. I would be more than happy to have staff that remotely, um, because I think that if you only live to go to work, then your life can't be that fulfilling. But I also think that you need to have that trust and that ability. And we do that at CAD. There's times where it's like, I know that program was done like 8 months ago, and I know you're going to open it up and you're going to wonder who you were 8 months ago. But we did not account for 2 hours of programming time. So please trust 8 months ago you to
It
do
worked
that.
last time.
Like,
So just
yeah.
please do it again.
It's unless of course you're going from quantity 1 to quantity 100, then tell 8 months ago they were an idiot, but we still need to make the parts.
Right.
But it is really difficult. I mean, I have the ability to go back to 2011 and see parts that I programmed then,
Mhm.
and I guarantee that I will if I looked at any one of them, I would probably wonder who the hell programmed it.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I mean, probably even 6 months ago, there's things that we do, and that's one of the things that why I love this part of manufacturing so much, is because every single day you're doing something, you're getting better,
Mhm.
or you're doing something that you shouldn't have done.
Right. Right. No, that's I agree. Next up, Matt Blackwell says, Brian, if you were designing a machine tending solution from the ground up, What non-obvious features and functions would you consider to be mandatory for your minimum viable product? Also, what would you consider optional but highly desirable?
I think they should all make you coffee in the morning. Good morning, Brian. Here's your
Everyone
coffee.
can have an espresso machine built into their automation.
Yeah,
We need to get on that.
We got Coffee Tech. Who else? We've got Bellwether for roasting, Coffee Tech for grinding. We don't have anybody that's been on your show for. Need somebody who's been somebody from fellow. Yeah. Anyway, so I think that's one of the interesting things. So I have the Trinity systems and I have the MAM system, and there are certain things with the MAM that are far better than the Trinity. But I think one of the things is being able to optionally tell a machine that a tending system can forego the MAM if it checks through, there's a tool that's broken. It'll pull in a pallet and it'll put it outside and say, something in this sequence will work. And I think that's really good because running multiple different jobs, it'll continue running. Mm-hmm. And I think that this again goes down to how experienced you need the people who are manufacturing to be. And in a prototype environment, it would not be out of the question if machine hit a broken tool in M99, which would essentially recall the main program, which is the robot load and unload, and then run everything through the roughing cycle or up to the broken tool. So I think, but that means that you have to know that up to that point in your tooling isn't going to be a high precision part, that if load and unload is going to be deviated to a point where you now have scrap parts.
Yeah. So, last thing you want is your chamfer mill to break and then it to be like, oh, well, I can, do everything up to that. And it's like, well,
yeah,
the chamfer mill is when all the other stuff that's supposed to blend to the stuff before it. And yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So, I think the machine tending it's really being able to load and unload by program type, program name. Trinity switched something between our AX5 and our AX4, where the AX5 has a program number associated with everything. So, if you have a program number, that's all you're seeing when you assign a pallet. And the AX4 you assign, and this is just a software update we've chosen not to do yet. It shows the part, the full part file name. And that's a little bit easier on the AX4 because it's got 12 pallets and the AX5 has 55 pallets, where you'd have really small letters. And I think that being able to, ease of assignment of pallets is really good, but being able to have machine tending have history, cycle time per pallet, being able to prioritize, have a priority list where, if you load up 55 pallets and you really want to make sure that the first 11 are done because those parts need to ship tomorrow, prioritizing is really important. Can be really important in a prototype shop. But really for me, it's having that, we, like I said, on 135 is we do we are automating the stuff that the automation is better at doing. It's not loading a vise and unloading a vise. It's loading and unloading a pallet. Mm-hmm. And that means it's a cafeteria worker. So it doesn't matter if it's spaghetti or if it's a hamburger, it's still loading one thing. I think that the tending of that is far easier than the tending of picking raw material, finished goods.
Right.
So it really, that question could become an unraveling spider web. And I think that, the prioritization and the assignment of the ease of assignment, and then the linking between the conversation between the machine running and the automation that's automated is really important. But every shop owner is going to have something different. and it's going to depend on what they're doing. There are definitely times, and you'll find this too, is like now you've got a whole bunch of op ones done, or, and maybe they're tabbed off, but some of those parts need an op two. So now what? Then you've got a pile of stupid op twos, and somebody's going to have to run those. So then what? So we're gonna invest in an intrinsic / Trinity system to hopefully take care of the stupid op twos. And that's a next level AI interface automation cell that's still in development. So, we'll see. So the answer to that question is I don't have an answer, but you need to know what it is. You need to be able to load it, unload it. And I think that shop owners that are hands-on are gonna want more features, and shop owners that don't want their staff to be so hands-on because they're sick and tired of having something broken are going to want less features.
Right. So maybe to ask, a slightly similar or different question, what is something about the Trinity and the MAM system that you like over the other? And like, what is your least favorite thing about each one that like the other one does better?
So the thing that what I would say about the MAM system, that's like Metser's been doing this for 30+ years, so they've figured out a lot of things.
Right.
And there's almost nothing about the MAM that I don't like. The more time that is spent with it and around it, there's certain things where I'm not colorblind, but I definitely don't like colors to be too close to each other. I would like to be able to assign colors that are a little bit more distinct. Whereas like our MAM is green when a palette is ready, and our Trinity is blue when a palette is ready, and green when it's done, and the MAM is blue when it's done. So it's like,
no.
So there are some of those things where it's like, the same thing happens with like a Haas that's running. The light is solid green.
Mm-hmm.
Matsura, when the part is running, it is blinking green. And so, this same thing with the feed hold and the cycle start are switched on those machines. So I'm going to say that the ease of use and the flexibility and you can tell the MAM what to do and it'll do exactly that is really nice. But I think the really nice thing for us in the AX system is the fact that it can go on pretty much any machine, and it's very, very easy to use, and it does exactly what you want it to do, as long as you don't give it too many inputs all at once. It's, if you're used to you cruising around a keyboard, you invariably hit D or G when you didn't want to hit D or G. And with one of these automation systems, if you push too fast, you might get the wrong palette in front of you and swear at the system, but it's just too fast. But I think like what Trinity is doing, and because it's a standalone system, is there to change things around a bit. So I could call them up and say, hey, I want these things to match, and they change the colors, and then all of a sudden, oh, we did a software update, sorry, your colors changed again.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, that brings me to the last few questions that I ask every week. First up, one CAM metrology or business tip or trick that helped you this week.
I was on vacation. So I think the business tip, your tip earlier today is a really good one, is like figuring out where you are. I think that's one of the things that I've been trying to work on the most, is like, company maturity is something is such a difficult thing to consider, because if you consider yourself very mature, you're probably not adapting. So you're always going to have some sort of immaturity. But I think what's really important is being able to look at yourself and your company and organization through your own eyes, and then being able to use the staff that you have and have them give you an interpretation of what it is. So what I've done is I've gone and I've created kind of templates for time management, but time management only so I know how to better estimate and understand what's going on. And I think that's one of the big things, like being able to communicate. When you as a boss come into the room and you ask for something, being able to first, tell a team why you're asking, and not when I say, hey, I want to do time management, I want to know what you're doing all day. It's like, what did I do wrong? It's like,
Right.
when do you frame it? Like, I believe that over the last 6 months, I've been improperly quoting work because I've noticed that our output is less. Can you please keep track of the time that you're doing? Because I want to make sure that the estimates that we provide to our customers better match the work that we're doing. That's a much better way of framing things.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
So, don't ask a question like you are asking it of yourself. Ask a question. So the business tip is ask a question how you would want to understand the question to be asked of you, because nobody knows what's going on in your head.
That's a great one. I really like that. Work-life balance, what does it mean to you and how do you manage it? Is it any different from 5 or 10 years ago?
Well, I've been telling my wife for years and years how the balance is going to be. Uh, yeah, I mean, I think that I definitely have more time where I've been trying by taking my own advice and saying, hey, in order to be better at doing the work and being able to scale, the delegation of tasks is a primary objective of mine in order to get some of that life back. But what invariably happens is my free time I tend to fill with more constructive business related things. So I eat my own time. Um, my wife and I take vacations. So we take trips that I'm supposed to be off of work stuff as much as possible, and it does work. And every time it happens that we're on a trip, I'm kind of writing down like, oh, these are the questions that were asked. These are the things that I need to work on. There's a book by, I think it's a Mike Michalowicz book, Clockwork, where he talks about a 4-week vacation. And that one of those things is like, because everything in a business should happen in 4 weeks. You'll have payroll, you'll have, purchasing, you'll have bills, all that stuff. But what I think is really important is being able to, like, you need to be able to stress test your business in a way that you're still able to catch things. But I think the empowerment of your team is really important for that to increase the balance. But to be honest, I'm still one of those people who's proud of the efforts that I put in. And then there's the bit of it is like, in some ways, if you were to be one of my staff and see that I'm there before anyone else and I'm still there when they leave, it definitely would dissuade you from wanting to start your own business. Like, I got here at 7 a.m. and he was here, and I left at 7 p.m. and he's still there. And I saw something on Instagram that was posted at midnight, which meant that he's still there. So, I'm still working on the work-life balance. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that I absolutely adore the work that I do. So it's, and I love the life that I have outside of work, but there's times where it's like, and this is one of those, like, I would say a psychiatrist would probably have words for this, but when, if you're finding yourself at work more than doing anything else, maybe everything else is not what you should be doing. So you gotta find something that you're passionate about in order to make it so you want to do that thing. I mean, this like, if you keep telling your wife that you want to spend time with them, but you never do, it's probably because you don't want to.
Right.
And that's like, I can't fix that. But I think that it's, in order to get that work-life balance as a business owner, you need to be able to figure out how to shut it off. And
It's tough though. Like, and especially when you've done a good job. I was just talking to my wife about this, that like I work so much, because I want to succeed, but like I really love what I've built. And like I love, for the most part, I love being here and I love doing the work and I find it really engaging and I really love being able to see something be built, like the company, and finishing all these projects and making it a better place to be every time. And so it is tough. It's like it's much easier to disconnect from work when it's going to work for someone else, and it's like at best I feel mediocre about it.
yeah, and I get that. The first time I came back to California from being in Vermont for 6 months and saw all the parts that were produced in my absence, I would be lying if I didn't have some envy of like, oh, you got to build that. Like, I know for the most part all the work that goes through, but there still are parts where it's like, I have to just say, shut up, idiot. You're not going to build that. Somebody else is going to build that. If you quote that and nobody else can build that, you're going to build that.
Right.
Which, means that you are not doing your job, which is getting out of here before midnight. And so if you can start transitioning your focus onto the things that actually make the lives of the people who work for you or with you better, then you're also doing your job. And I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of like, your primary objective as a business owner is to create jobs.
Right.
And if you're not creating jobs, you are the worker. And if you do, it's totally fine not to do that. But if you are going into being a business owner to build a business, your primary objective has to be to make jobs.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
And sometimes the best job, if you don't want to do that, you create the job of, whatever the person is who oversees you, and you do the job that you're passionate about. So I've been to a company before that the owner of the business did not have anything to do with the business, but being the internal thinker.
I like that.
Yeah. So
what thing that doesn't really pencil out that you've bought that you wouldn't be without just for the reduced aggravation, fatigue, or aversion? So what thing have you bought that like any business professional would tell you were stupid for buying, but that you would buy again in a heartbeat?
Oh man, it's been a while since I bought something. Well, no, that's not true. It's been a while since I bought something that doesn't pencil out, and a part of that has to do with the fact of being like kind of in this scarcity mindset. But we recently we were drilling holes in 304 stainless, and it had to be 1.2 inches deep, and we were using standard carbide drills. And for $240, we bought a crazy drill. Micron makes this, it's a crazy drill. And I was like, we were able to drill, I think it was over I guess the drill is done over 400 holes, 500 holes that deep, and has not broken, and the holes are straight. And that is one of those things where that could have gotten like 50 standard carbide drills for the same cost. And so I wouldn't be without that. It didn't pencil out in theory, but in practice it did.
Okay. I love that. I've heard nothing but good things about Micron drills. I've never had a chance to try them yet, but I've heard really, really good things.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the scary thing, is like a $240 tool breaks just as fast as Like when it breaks, it breaks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
All right. Last up, what have you been researching this week? Doesn't have to be manufacturing related, just what's been popping up in your browser.
there's, being outside of work, there's been a lot of stuff that I've been looking at. For the upcoming year, it's really like kind of self stuff that I've been working on myself, trying to make sure that I'm continuing this practice of trying to do less of the building work, taking on more time. So it's been like time management, time tracking things, which is really difficult for somebody who thinks that they have their shit together. To try to create checks and balances against that. It's like,
Right.
you know, I know I know that if somebody were to ask me at 5 p.m. on any given workday what I did during the day, I would not be able to sit down and give a tally of that. And so I've been trying to find like one of my fundamental issues is that if the that I've created takes more work to do than the thing that I'm trying to solve, it is no longer something worth doing. So, time tracking that isn't actually saying, if I had my phone and it said, "Hey, you got up, you did something else for this many minutes," I wear an iWatch, and I wish that it would keep track of like how many minutes I was not sitting still.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to have a device that kind of like when you have your banking portfolio or at the end of the month, and it kind of auto populates like, this was your mortgage and this was groceries and this was like, I was like, no, that actually wasn't groceries, that was an end mill.
Right.
But I've been researching software that does that type of timekeeping that is going to be limited or minimal effort for me.
Have you found anything worth looking
I have no. I mean, I found that timekeep is a thing. You still have to start, stop. Um, you know, and I still have problems when I'm trying to time how long an operation takes to set up when I'm training somebody to figure out what the cycle time is, or like part to part supposed to be. And I look down and I'm like, oh, I never hit lap.
Right.
So, I want as much automation and that type of time tracking, because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to do better scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do better scheduling if you don't understand where your time is going.
Right.
And, I am not a software person, but I've looked at like, if you could get a tile to follow you, like a tile to follow you around, and then proximity switches to understand where you as an individual were standing for how much time, then it might be, maybe you're not going to understand what you did all day, but you will understand where you were.
Right. It would give you a schedule that you could fill in at the end of the day and probably remember what you did.
Yeah. A lot easier than like, I talk to my wife about this often, which is she's a stay-at-home mom who's also, doing other stuff. But like for her, when I wake up in the morning and I do one thing, I go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it is no argument, because I get up in the morning, I go to work, and I come home. And so I did one thing during the day. And if you looked at, she did this once and she kept track of what she did. And there were like 5-minute increments between like, got a card already, did this. Like, it looks like her day is incredibly busy and there's like, but I didn't just go to work. I dealt with 30 employees and I did, but I can't do that, because then I would have 40 minutes where I spent time figuring out what the hell I did.
Yeah.
So.
No, I know I listened to the Bomb a fair bit, and Grimsmo was talking about keeping track of every 15-minute block in his journal for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that'd be really cool. And also I feel like it would give me a ton of anxiety of just like seeing how poorly I managed my time, or that I'm not nearly as efficient as I thought I was.
Yeah. But then you're also like, that if I did that every 15 minutes, that's 1 minute every 15 minutes that I'm losing. And after 8 hours, that is
right.
That is programming half apart.
Yeah. Nope. I'm right there with you. Well, Brian, thanks so much, man. Let's do this again, maybe before 3 years.
Okay, that sounds great. I would appreciate it. And if maybe 18 months is the right amount of time for me to listen to myself talk, so I understand what it is that I did. So
yeah, I like that big picture stuff. Yeah. That seems right. Well, thanks again. Please let everybody know where they can find you online if they've got questions or want to reach out or anything like that.
So on Instagram, we're KAD Models, and that's KAD Models. So because if you listen to 135, you would understand that it's Kippen, and dog now. But Dove was John's last name, and yeah. So there's that. And then on LinkedIn, I'm Brian Kippen. Brian Kippen sounds like a pretty common name, but I'm 95% sure there's only me and somebody in Missouri who played basketball once, and that was not me. So,
awesome. Well, thank you again. Thanks to new Patreon members, Chris Bloomquist. You help me send people like Brian, mic, headset, and camera so you guys get good audio and video. Thank you all for listening, and I will be back next week.